Here's another little video where we use somewhat loose connections to talk about foreigners in 90s All Japan that don't get mentioned a whole lot. It's kind of a curious subject. Someone asked me in the comments of the last video if 90s All Japan constitutes a main character on my channel, more than likely with Kenta Kobashi at its epicentre. And yeah, it is something of a common theme. Therefore, we should explore, as much as we can, the deeper depths of this classic period, going beyond the Pillars, the Hansons, the Gordies and what have you. Last time out, we had a bunch of ECW legends taking trips to All Japan. The wrestlers we have here don't have quite the same status, but they are names who became prominent in the Attitude Era, whether it was for WWF or WCW. Of this selection, there is at least one fella who did end up reaching the top of the Feds Mountain, and while the other folks featured here are a bit more obscure, there is certainly one who made an impact in All Japan. Indeed, we're actually going to be seeing a sequel to one of the most infamous moments in the Attitude Era, the follow-up to the Brawl-for-All. I can't promise too much in the way of good wrestling this time out, but it should be an interesting journey. Let's go. So I just mentioned that there's someone here who got all the way to the top of the WWE, and we may as well start with him. It's Justin Bradshaw. Actually, it's not just Justin Bradshaw. It'd be more accurate to say that this is an entry for the new Blackjacks, Justin Bradshaw and Barry Windham, seeing as they both entered the Real World Tag League in 1997. Indeed, they did so while they were under WWF contract. All Japan and WWF did have a friendly relationship with each other after all, and this occasionally bubbles up to the surface in various ways, whether it's the appearance of a young Takeya Omori at the 1996 Royal Rumble, Vader appearing at All Japan's 25th anniversary Dome show a few months before he left the Fed and joined All Japan full-time, or some curious ideas that didn't make it to TV. Things like Kenta Kobashi having a run in the States, or potential spots at the aforementioned Dome show for folks like The Undertaker and Steve Austin that probably never got too far but were at least talked about. And then we've got the new Blackjacks, a team that were utterly stuck in the lower card in 1997 WWF, basically doing nothing of note. Indeed, the matches that we can see from their real-world tag league jaunt are probably the best showcases that we have of Bradshaw and Windham in action. There is a little bit of a callback to All Japan history here. Both of the original Blackjacks, Mulligan and Lanza, did a tour each for All Japan in the 70s, although they didn't tour together. Mulligan appeared in 1974 and Lanza appeared in 1978. Lanza also appeared in the 1978 Tag League, teaming with Nick Bockwinkel, and Blackjack Mulligan, Barry Windham's dad, of course, did unsuccessfully challenge Giant Bubba for the PWF heavyweight title. And while this is Bradshaw's only tour for All Japan, Barry Windham did have a couple of other appearances, so it makes sense to talk a little about that while we're here. Firstly, well, how well did the new Blackjacks do in the Tag League? They certainly weren't ever in contention. In fact, they finished joint bottom with 4 points, sharing the wooden spoon with Hayabusa and Jinsei Shinzaki, Giant Kimara and Juni Zamida, and Tamon Honda and Takeya Omori. It's a very mid-card performance indeed. Still, we can see a couple of their Tag League bouts from All Japan TV. We've got one against Gary Albright and Steve Williams' Triangle of Power, another against the Get team of Kenta Kobashi and Johnny Ace, and we do also have a big battle of the Cowboys, the new Blackjacks versus Stan Hansen and Bobby Duncum Jr., who we're also going to be covering. The matches against Kobashi and Ace and Albright and Williams feature moments that are good and bad. We do actually get some nice, quite cool exchanges from time to time involving Bradshaw. He and Kobashi have a pretty nice bout of strikes at each other, and he does manage to hit a nice pre-clothesline from hell on Kenta, even if in the end he does get conquered by Kobashi's own lariat. Bradshaw most certainly looks the part, it should be said. The new Blackjacks is kind of old school even by the standards of 90s All Japan presentation, but he's obviously got an appropriate size, and he certainly doesn't shy off in the ring when it comes to ornery heavyweight clubs and boots. It's not his first time in Japan, seeing as he had a short stint in War as Death Mask in 1995, but it's his first time without much in the way of a gimmick. Barry Windham is, I do think unfortunately, a bit of a spent force by 1997 due to his injuries, and he tends to wear out a little as these bouts go on. Not only that, but Bradshaw has revealed that Windham was actually pretty bloody sick on this tour, to a point where he really shouldn't have been there. However, he didn't say anything because he didn't want to screw it up for Hawk. In spite of everything, we do get a very cool and spirited strike exchange between him and Steve Williams. It's a shame the same can't be said about the exchanges between Windham and Johnny Ace, which are really quite weak. Both of these matches are okay, and unsurprisingly the new Blackjacks come out on the losing side of both. They are facing much more established teams after all. But I suppose the most attention's going to be on the battle between Hanson and Duncum, which undoubtedly promises to include 7 different shades of cowboy shit. Let's have a look into this Wild West tussle then, from the Corican Hall on the 16th of November. It's quite fine actually. It's certainly not a match you should expect any kind of technical proficiency from, but it's certainly got plenty of old school style brawling, lots of hard hitting, the odd bit of chairs clashing and so forth. Everyone has a nice bit here and there, although again I do think that Bradshaw is the one that's sticking out the most, as he's got a definite sureness of movement. He's not a technical wrestler, but he sure is an intense one. There is good reason for that, really. Again, something that JBL has gone into, this time on Something to Wrestle with Bruce Pritchard. A big chunk of the new Blackjacks coming to All Japan for this tour was because WWF wanted to keep the good relations with them, hoping to cultivate a relationship similar to what WCW and New Japan had that would allow them to bring over the likes of, say, Steve Williams, who they'd been chasing for a long time, perhaps even Kabashi and Misawa, at least temporarily. On a personal level, Bradshaw's contract with the WWF was coming up early in 1998, and he didn't expect to be re-signed. So he's kinda got one foot already in Japan here, wanting to work in All Japan after his WWF departure. Needless to say, he's holding nothing back, meaning that the new Blackjacks, with this one chance to actually work matches that go beyond a couple of minutes on TV, are actually doing pretty good work. Now of course, in the end WWF did re-sign Bradshaw, he eventually does get properly over with Farouk in the Acolytes, and the rest is history. There is perhaps an alternate timeline where Bradshaw becomes an All Japan mainstay, mind you. Anyway, you may be surprised to find out that the new Blackjacks actually do end up winning this match. Bradshaw gets an advantage on Duncum when he's able to hit his powerbomb, but then he gets starched with a Western Lariat. And yet Windham is able to get the surprise win. With Hanson not quite able to get back in, he backslides Duncum for a 3 count. Honestly, it is a bit of an odd ending, as Hanson clearly could have got there, but hey-ho. Not exactly a classic, but the match is fine. This was one of 2 wins for the new Blackjacks in the Tag League, the other coming against Hayabusa and Jinsei Shinzaki. We'd also have a 6-man from November 28th where the 2 cowboy teams duke it out again. This time the Blackjacks are joined by Monarchia Mossman, or Taiyo Kia, and Giant Kimalo is riding with Hanson and Duncum. This time the Lariat gets revenge. After a big diving Lariat from Duncum, the win is virtually cleared. Hanson's left alone with Bradshaw, and while he's able to block once with a high boot, Hanson hits the Western Lariat on the rebound and gets the 3. Sunwise plays, the 48-year-old Hanson throws up the longhorns and shouts, "Yeet!" and we're all happy with our plates of wrestling pork and beans. I mentioned that Barry Windham had a couple of other All Japan tours. He's not exactly a consistent competitor, but All Japan did get to see old Bazza when he was much more in his prime. First all the way back in 1983, when he had a run at the Real World Tag League with Ron Fuller, then in 1986 with another tag-focused one, this time teaming with Mike Rotunda as the US Express. The most significant tour for Windham, however, is early 1990. It's his return to the ring after his very brief WWF run as Widowmaker ended quite abruptly. He teams a little with a young man billed as Dusty Rhodes Jr., who we certainly could be seeing later on, and at the end of the tour he actually makes a challenge for the Triple Crown, taking on Jumbo Tsuruta at the Budokan on the 6th of March. It's not a match I'd bother to look at any other time, so here we go. It's kind of an odd one, to be honest. About that you feel could have been a lot more considering the pair's talent level. And yet it never really gets the chance to pass mediocrity. What we have from the slightly clipped TV broadcast is a match where Windham controls virtually the whole thing, Jumbo working from behind pretty much the whole way. We get to about 12 minutes in, Windham goes for his finishing brainbuster, but Jumbo blocks it, immediately hits the backdrop hold, and that's all she wrote. Tsuruta defends in 12 minutes 39. This wasn't the main event match of the evening, but I really feel this could have been more. A 25-minute seesaw match with this pair at the top of their game could have been magic, but that's most definitely not what you get here, and I kinda wonder why that was. It is certainly one of the worst Triple Crown matches from the classic period, but it is a bit of a curio. It does get mentioned on occasion by the commentators when the new Blackjacks are kicking around. Anywho, there we are. A kinda lousy match, but I thought I should mention it. We stay in Cowboy Land for the next entry, and it's a fella who doesn't really get mentioned a lot nowadays. He was a small part of a quite comedic stable in WCW that did manage to get a little over, but then, well, he shockingly passed way too young in January of 2000, only 34 years old. Again, All Japan is the best place to see some proper work from Bobby Duncum Jr. He was quite a regular part of the foreign team from 1995 all the way to 98 before he signed a contract with WCW. Now, seeing as All Japan always pays attention to their history, we should note that Bobby Duncum Jr.'s dad also appeared for the company, right back in the early days. Duncum Sr. did tours in 1973 and 1975, often teaming with various other evil foreigners like Rob Remus, Sergeant Slaughter of course, Fritz Von Erich and Killer Carl Cox, usually in losing efforts against the likes of Giant Bubba and the Destroyer. As for Duncum Jr., he initially came to Japan in 1993, only a year into his career, wrestling a couple of bouts for the short-lived Network of Wrestling or NOW promotion, before arriving in All Japan in May of 95. Being that he's 6'4" and 265 pounds, Giant Bubba naturally felt that he had potential. And he was right, even if Duncum Jr. never quite managed to break out of the mid-card. There is certainly plenty of footage of Bobby Duncum Jr. in All Japan. You can find him in there with Kawada, Misawa, Kabashi, Taue, pretty much everybody. Although being that he's a mid-card guy, it's pretty much exclusively in tag bouts. Unsurprisingly, Duncum Jr. teams a lot with Stan Hansen, the old kin of all wrestling cowboys, taking the younger Duncum under his wing and so forth, and they were also in the 97 Tag League, accumulating 6 points. But yeah, it is generally a lot of tag wrestling. I only found one televised All Japan singles match for Bobby Duncum Jr. in the years he was there, and well, just like Tommy Dreamer, it's against Akira Taue, a match from June of 1998. I will say that it is at least better than that rather awful Dreamer Taue match, seeing as Duncum does bring quite a lot more fire to the party, although it is still only around a 5-minute bout, and even that is cut a little. Also, the highlight of the match is a big botch, which is never a good thing. Duncum goes real big, looking for a no-hands plancher on Taue, but it all goes to crap. It's a top dollar moment, and kind of a scary one. Duncum comes kinda close to spiking himself, but just about avoids it. Anyway, Taue soon takes control and polishes off Duncum with the Nodara Otoshi in short order. Something about Taue and the foreign mid-carders really doesn't seem to mix. I don't know about you, but I've got a feeling that the dynamic one doesn't particularly want to be bothered by such bouts, isn't quite putting his best foot forward here. It's just a hunch. As far as decent matches go, well, we have some odd ones kicking about here and there. The highest rated All Japan one for Duncum is a 6-man tag from January 12, 96, where he's teaming with Stan Hansen and Gary Albright against a star-faced trio of Misawa, Kabashi and Jun Akiyama. We join this match in progress, getting to see the last 7 minutes, and yeah, it's pretty good. A big chunk of what we see is Akiyama selling for the foreigners, and the real highlight of this match is, to be honest, Gary Albright, because geez, that guy was just ridiculous. He gets a few suplexes in and he just picks up and throws people like Akiyama and Misawa around like they are nothing. These are strong folks, but nothing compared to Albright. Hansen's brawling is what you would expect, and as for Bobby Duncum Jr., he makes his own contributions. His offense is certainly on the generic side when compared to Albright's bombast and Hansen's unpredictability, but he gets a bit of heat on Akiyama. Eventually, Duncum and Akiyama are left alone in the ring, and Duncum looks to be getting the advantage. A big power slam, a big bulldog. However, Akiyama does a quick reversal, catches Duncum out of the corner with the exploder, and wins the bout for the natives in 17 minutes 17. From what we see of the action, it's a pretty good main event in Kagawa. Generally, what we see of Bobby Duncum Jr. in All Japan is inoffensive. He's totally fine in teams with the likes of Hansen and Gary Albright, and honestly, he is usually the one who ends up taking the fall. The fact that Duncum and Albright are so different from each other makes them a bit more of an interesting partnership to me than the more obvious Duncum-Hansen tag, although naturally Duncum and Hansen tagged a lot more because, well, you know, cowboy shit. Sadly, Bobby Duncum Jr. and Gary Albright both ended up passing in close proximity to one another. Gary Albright shockingly had a heart attack in Lorraine on January 7, 2000 at the age of 36, and on January 24th, Bobby Duncum accidentally overdosed on fentanyl at the age of 34. A long-standing torn rotator cuff injury was the main contributor to his painkiller addiction, something he felt he needed to hide from both his WCW and earlier ECW paymasters. Sad thing was, at the time, wrestlers dying early due to painkiller overdoses was so freaking common that the death of a WCW guy who'd been on TV as part of the West Texas Rednecks only a few months previously, before a knee injury put him out of commission, barely even warranted attention, was scarcely mentioned. Terrible times indeed. Bobby Duncum Jr. may not have been the greatest wrestler ever or anything like that, but I thought he deserved a bit of a moment in the sun here, a chance to highlight his work. Before we get to the feature presentation, I thought I'd have a quick glance at some other folk who you might come across in 90s All Japan. This is definite before they were famous type stuff, but it's fun to know that these people were in the company, albeit briefly. First up, we have something that actually follows on neatly from the first two entries and takes us to a time just after the big split in the summer of 2000. We've mentioned Barry Windham, we've mentioned the West Texas Rednecks, and as it turns out, the Rapist Crap Hitmakers went on a world tour. Well, a tour to all Japan anyway. Barry Windham and his brother Kendall, both of whom were a part of the group in WCW, took part in the 2000 Real World Tag League as the Rednecks, eventually scoring 6 points in a tournament that was won by a reunited varsity club in the shape of Steve Williams and Mike Rotunda. Yeah, times were tough in the months after the Noah Exodus. In a roundabout way, this leads to the frontman of the West Texas Rednecks making a one-night-only appearance on 28th January 2001 at the Tokyo Dome in a show we'll be looking at later. Kurt Hennig, who did 2 All Japan tours in 1985 and 1988, teamed with Barry Windham and Rotunda, and they lost to the team of Jim Steele, George Hines, and Johnny Smith. I mentioned earlier that a certain Dustin Runnels did a couple of All Japan tours. Amusingly, I think it's the only time that he was actually billed as Dusty Rhodes Jr. rather than Dustin Rhodes. I don't think he appeared on TV much. The one bout I can find is 5 minutes of a singles match against Davey Boy Smith, and what we can see is totally fine, both guys showing off their skill. Still, Davey Boy's the much more established guy here, and so he ends up getting the win. The Bulldog hits an absolute whopper of a superplex to get the 3 count. Not bad at all, and Dustin would make a one-off return to All Japan many years later in a suitably freaky bout from 2007. Billed as Gold Dustin, he teamed with Hakushi, Jinsei Shinzaki of course, to go against Great Muta and Tajiri. Certainly a match that's big on the gimmicks, and the mist. Speaking of wrestlers who may occasionally show off a bit of a kinky side, how about Big Vito? Yep, the full-blooded Italian journeyman did an All Japan tour, and we have a couple of televised bouts to prove it. This one coming in the last days of his earliest gimmick, the evil German Skull von Crush, in early 1998. We have a couple of televised bouts here, neither of which are exactly essential. One is against Takeo Omori, and the other is against Giant Kimala 2. The Omori bout sees Vito mostly in control and actually doing the odd decent thing, but Omori comes back after Vito misses an elbow drop, hitting one of the weakest powerbombs I've seen in some time and winning the match with a diving knee drop. As for the Kimala match, well, there is nothing good to report there, seeing as Kimala is pretty clearly the worst 90s All Japan regular. He eventually wins after a really quite slow diving clothesline, also executing a quite miserable senton along the way. Not much cop. Still, there is one highlight for Skull von Crush, something so big it's even on Vito's wiki page. During the annual Korakuen Hall Battle Royal, he hit a stunner on Mitsuharu Misawa, and that resulted in Misawa being pinned. Now granted, there's about 10 others pinning Misawa along with Vito, but it's a bit of a turn up. Next, perhaps even more obscure than Vito, we have one Sean Morgan. Yup, it's Val Venis. Before his time in WWE, and long before acting the complete twat on the internet, he did 2 tours for All Japan in 1997. Again, I'd be lying if I said there was a lot to report here. I found one singles match that he was in against Kentaro Shiga. It's a card opening bout and it's all pretty basic, but it's a match that Sean Morgan wins following the money shot. As for why he was called Sean Morgan as opposed to his real name, Sean Morley, well, that's simply because of the Japanese language and its lack of distinct R and L sounds, thus making a surname like Morley pretty hard to pronounce. There is also a tag match that I found with him. He was in a team called Strike Hard with Rex King, and there's a handheld bout where they lose against Takeo Omori and Tsuyoshi Kikuchi. Now Rex King, I suppose, is another entry here, one who's even more obscure than anyone else on the WWF front. Who is Rex King, you ask? Well, I'll tell you. In WWF, he was Timothy Well. Yes, one half of the awful New Generation era tag team Well Done, along with Stephen Dunn, or Steve Dole. So yeah, that's fun, isn't it? I'm sure you're all glad you know about this stuff now. Annoyingly, there's one other guy I simply couldn't find footage of. David Heath, who did a single tour for All Japan in 1998 and is of course much better known for his WWF exploits as Gangrel. Hopefully you've enjoyed this whistle-stop tour through these various obscurities, but now, well, it's time for the main event. There are few events in the Attitude Era more infamous than the Brawl-for-All, complete with its winner that absolutely nobody expected. No one ever figured that Bart Gunn was quite so tasty and educated with his fists. Dr. Death Steve Williams didn't figure that, The Godfather didn't figure that, and Bradshaw most certainly didn't when the Bodacious one KO'd him in the final. In another world, where Bart Gunn was the intended winner, such a victory could have sent him rocketing up the card. In reality, Bart Gunn's thoroughly unintended victory saw him get virtually wiped from the telly, only to resurface at WrestleMania 15 for a mismatch against Butterbean. I still giggle at the Dark Side of the Ring episode where Butterbean says that he figured that poor old Bart's victory was not quite what the WWF had planned, and that he was brought in for his punishment. Bart Gunn was obviously released soon after that, but that certainly wasn't the end of him. As Mike Barton in All Japan, he was certainly far more successful than he ever was in the Fed, and more successful than anyone else we've featured here. You can find Mike Barton on basically every All Japan tour from the end of 1998 to October 2002, at which point he crossed over to New Japan and stayed there for a couple of years. Needless to say, there's quite a lot of Mike Barton in Japan footage out there, including some matches that I really wish I could cover here. The team of Mike Barton and Jim Steele had an absolutely excellent bout against Tenkozy, Satoshi Kojima and Hiroyoshi Tenzan in 2001. But alas, that's a New Japan bout, so I can't really look at it, lest I risk the wrath of Asahi TV. There's also a very good tag match from All Japan in 2000 where he teams up with Johnny Ace in the last match of Mr. People Power Dynamic Dude, Here's Me Getting Dropped on My Head by Misawa Again's full-time career, against the Holy Demon Army from the 9th of June 2000. It most certainly isn't the best match involving the Holy Demon Army to take place on the 9th of June at the Nippon Budokan, but it's a strong tussle, and Mike Barton makes a pretty good account of himself. There's plenty more highlights for Barton in All Japan that we will get to, but I think what's really interesting here is that, with Mike Barton a regular fixture in All Japan, he soon crosses paths again with Steve Williams, once Dr. Death makes his return to All Japan in 2000. Dr. Death wants revenge, and this sets the pair on a road that, believe it or not, leads all the way to the Tokyo Dome. How do we get there? Well, funnily enough, Mike Barton's All Japan journey actually started before he was released by WWF. Having had enough of sitting at home twiddling his thumbs, he debuted for the company in the 1998 Tag League, teaming with Johnny Ace. Steve Williams perhaps wished at the time that he could do the same. After all, beyond a couple of segments where some quite familiar masked dude ambushed Bodacious Bart, WWF never made anything out of Bart Gunn KOing Dr. Death. As it happens, Bart's performance in the Brawl-for-All really helped when it came to him being hired by Giant Bubba and All Japan, especially knocking out Dr. Death. It gave him a very legit aura, and made his hiring something of a no-brainer. He was actually the last ever wrestler that Giant Bubba signed. At last, after a generally miserable time in the States, Dr. Death returns to All Japan at the start of 2000, and it isn't long before he gets into it with Mike Barton. They face off on the 17th of January 2000 at the Osaka Prefectural Gym in a match that we only have a couple of minutes of. Apparently this bout was originally booked as a draw, but the returning Williams disagreed with that, and it was changed to a win for Williams. He felt that a draw would hurt him so soon after his return, and Barton went along with it, correctly thinking that things would be reciprocated down the line. We only get a few clips of Williams hitting his big moves, finishing Barton with the homicide backdrop. You will note that Williams repeatedly makes the triangle sign, referencing the triangle of power and paying homage to his former tag partner Gary Albright, who passed away a few days before this bout. As it happens, this ends up being a false start to the Barton-Williams feud. Despite the match, All Japan hold off on them really going at it for a while in order to build Williams back up yet further, mainly concentrating on a Dream Monster tag team with Vader. In the end, this proves to be the correct decision for the feud. The All Japan relationship between Mike Barton and Steve Williams is quite a complex one, the subject of a long rivalry that eventually turned into a partnership. It certainly wasn't a matter of simply having one rematch because of the Brawl-for-All and leaving it there. The idea is that while Barton got that win in WWF, this is Dr. Death's home court, things are much tougher around here, and Mike Barton's gradually got to prove himself. Which, as it happens, he does. He is certainly rewarded for his loyalty to All Japan and Motoko Bubba, what with him sticking around after the big Noah split, and in a 6-man tag bout on September 2nd, Barton pinned Toshiaki Kawada to win the match for his team. Clean as a whistle. The split also ends up putting Barton and Williams together as a tag team, at least for a short time, which adds another dimension to their rivalry. I should mention that the excellent Balog's AJPW archive channel has 3 videos that go through basically the entirety of Mike Barton's All Japan run, with a special focus on the rivalry between Barton and Williams. If you want the absolute full Monty, I recommend checking that out. Anyway, all of this leads up to the really big Barton-Williams bout, which happens on the 28th of January 2001 at the Tokyo Dome. While it wasn't actually the main event of the night, All Japan's TV show presented it as such, complete with references to this being a revenge match for Dr. Death. While All Japan's roster was obviously heavily depleted after the split, the people they've brought in, not to mention the relationship they've started to forge with New Japan and the various old-timers who return for the night, means that this Dome show still ends up kind of stacked. There's Genichiro Tenryu, Kensuke Sasaki, Keiji Muto, and of course, this is also the almighty Stan Hansen's retirement show. It's still not a particularly good card on the attendance front, announced at 58,700 when the actual number was around 32,000, a chunk of which was papered. But there's a fair bit going on, and we should have a proper look at the Barton-Williams bout, which followed straight on from Stan Hansen's retirement ceremony. A part of the idea here is that Barton and Williams are now All Japan's 2 top foreigners, and this is a fight for the spot that Hansen is vacating. While this match really isn't on a Tokyo Dome level, we get a good encounter that centres around Dr. Death's wrestling versus Barton's striking. Also, there is a bonus Attitude Era person in the ring, that being the referee, who is Yusuke Wally Yamaguchi, aka Yamaguchi-san, heel Kaientai manager, expert at chopping off unmentionables, and also great at shouting, "Break it, come on, stop it," a lot. Williams takes control following a snake eyes in the corner, and we end up with a really nasty outside spot. Williams backdrops Barton onto the fricking guardrail. I've not seen such a move before, but that sure looked like it absolutely sucked to take. I mean, a regular backdrop from Williams is nasty enough. Williams continues the aggression with turnbuckle splashes and suplexes in the ring, all while Mike Rotundo, reunited with Dr. Death in All Japan as the Varsity Club, looks on. But Barton does reverse, drapes Williams over the ropes, and manages a serious show of strength by getting Dr. Death up for a Hannin vertical suplex. We get a Brett's rope diving elbow, Barton throws Williams out, and we do get a big old dive from the post to the floor. That at least wakes up the crowd a bit. Williams regains control after catching Barton with a spinebuster and gives him a couple of big tackles. He goes for the Oklahoma Stampede from there but accidentally clobbers Yamaguchi-san. Barton takes the opportunity to reverse and hit his Barton cutter, but obviously Yamaguchi is down. You don't often see ref bumps like this in All Japan. Rotundo gets a body shot for trying to interfere, and eventually Barton gets a near fall from a clothesline. Following that, Williams tries to get at Barton in the corner, but Barton repeatedly knocks him back, climbing the ropes. However, Williams is able to crotch him, going up himself and hitting a huge belly-to-belly superplex straight into the Doctor Bomb. However, Barton kicks out. Barton gets one last flourish, shifting weight on a backdrop attempt, but when he tries to run in, he's caught, positioned and nailed with the homicide backdrop. Barton is stuck in the ropes, which is unfortunate for him, because it means Dr. Death's going to pull him out of there, lock in, and backdrop him again. Needless to say, that's your lot. Dr. Death Steve Williams gets his revenge on Mike Barton in 14 minutes 47. It's an okay match. I feel it would have been a lot better in the Budokan. The Tokyo Dome is not at all the right venue for this, seeing as a lot of the folks who came to this show are really here to see old-timers. Stan Hansen's retirement, Terry Funk, Abdullah the Butcher, Mil Mascaras. It's not the right crowd, and the match is heatless. There is some good moments, but the lack of heat definitely hurts, as does any idea that these guys are fighting for Hansen's spot. In all honesty, neither Steve Williams in 2001 or Mike Barton are going to be able to fill those boots, so such a prospect isn't taken seriously. But then this is a different All Japan, a still greatly diminished one that's trying to fight back after the annus horribilis that was 2000. They're still around and they've got time, so it could happen, but most definitely not yet. Despite the loss at the Tokyo Dome, Barton's All Japan star would continue to rise. He definitely gets to a level where he is on a par with Steve Williams, performing just as well as he does in the 2001 Champion Carnival, including a 30-minute draw with Dr. Death, and getting his own pin on Williams in a tag bout. In the end, he more than earns the respect of everyone in All Japan, and his once heated rivalry with Dr. Death becomes more like a partnership and then a friendship. They team together several times, they show plenty of camaraderie, and Williams was there to cheer Barton on in what was, undoubtedly, his greatest performance of all at the 2002 Champion Carnival. Barton finished second in Block A with 10 points, enough to head to the Final Four on April 10th, where he would face Block B winner Genichiro Tenryu. And in something of a shock, Mike Barton triumphed over Mr. Pro-Res, Steve Williams roaring him on every step of the way as he wins after the Barton cutter in just 5 minutes 38. In the end, Barton would fall short in the final against Keiji Muto, who'd become the first wrestler to win both the Champion Carnival and the G1 Climax, but this is still very much the highlight of his career. This comes close to the end of Barton's time in All Japan. With Muto taking over the company in the summer, Mike Barton and his then regular tag partner Jim Steele decided to leave for New Japan in October of 2002, mainly doing so out of loyalty to the departing Motoko Baba. The whole Barton-Williams saga actually makes for a pretty good and lengthy wrestling story, even if it is one with an incredibly unconventional beginning. After all, it probably wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the Brawl-for-All, of all things. All Japan wasn't exactly being watched by a whole lot of people at this time, of course, so chances are a lot of you have missed all of this. But it is worth checking out on Al Balog's channel, and you may find that while Mike Barton isn't necessarily an amazing foreign talent, he is quite an underrated one, and he did play an important part in All Japan during a rather dark period for the company. And with that, we are about ready to wrap things up here. Hopefully you've enjoyed this little Attitude and All Japan crossover, and until the next time, bye for now.